Okay, welcome everybody. So we'll get to some quick introductions very shortly, but just to give a quick intro to the session. So the session is called From Zero to Beta, Luton's LocalGov Transformation in 90 Days. And it's actually, when I was looking at it before this, it was actually a little bit less than that. It was about 11 weeks in total, so 77 days, but it's not as catchy as a title. So as a part of this session, we, Annertech and Javik from Luton side are going to go through what was needed to make it happen. It's quite a short time frame for this type of thing, to be able to get it from just inception right from the beginning, right to the beta launch of the public site in a short time span. And we're going to talk about some of the tools that we use to be able to do this, some of the things that made this a success. But before that, let's just do some quick introductions. Javik.
Yes, so hi everyone. Thank you for your time and thank you for joining. So I'm Jay Patel. I joined Luton Council in June last year. Haven't worked in the public sector before, so open sort of to everything really within local government now. Done 15 years in private industry before, and my kind of initial team is a digital services team, and as a part of the DTech department, our core sort of resident transformation, one of the projects is our sort of external website, which working with Annertech, we're looking to change.
Good stuff. I'm Sean, so I'm a project manager for Annertech. I've been with Annertech for about 8 years, and more specifically as the project manager for this Luton project. A little bit about Annertech. We've been working in the local gov space for quite an amount of time, so predating LGD even. We'll come back to that a little bit later. We've been involved with LGD since the beta phase, so in about 2021. I think the original, maybe when it was thought about first, was about 2018, so quite early days. We're a LocalGov Drupal certified supplier. We're also in the wider community a Drupal Platinum certified partner, so we're quite involved in both the LocalGov and the wider Drupal community. And Annertech has been around for quite a while. Annertech has been around for about 18 years. I thought it was 15 years until I checked it this morning. That was our last big birthday, but it turns out that was 3 years ago. So we're yeah, time moves on. So a little bit about Annertech in the LGD space. So as I mentioned, we've been in the local government space for quite some time before LGD even made it cool. So we have worked with quite a few councils and continue to work with quite a few councils outside of the LGD space with Drupal websites, with maintaining them and with supporting them. We also work with quite a few websites or councils, even in the local gov space. So I'll just show a few of those there. And we continue it more. So we're working with Luton on this, and we're working with a few more that are in play currently. And what all this means is we know what's involved in local council websites. So pre-LGD, having worked with sites before that, we understand the effort and consideration and time and resources that are needed to go into this. And we can see the improvements that LGD are making to make that easier and simpler for councils to be able to enter the space. So what is LocalGov Drupal? So there was a session earlier in the week for anyone who was at it, so who will have a quick introduction to this. But for anyone who wasn't, LocalGov Drupal is an open source digital publishing platform. And what that means is it's a freely available code platform to use, which allows for tools that are common and challenges that are common across councils to solve problems on their public facing website. More importantly, it's a community of experts. So not just technical people, not just Drupal people, councils. So it says here built by councils for councils, and that's important. So what it means is that there's a community available of councils supporting each other with a common goal, working towards the tools, the features, the conversations that need to happen to make all of this happen. And outside of the technical ability, it's just as important to be able to drive a community like this. So we'll move a little bit to Javik. So Javik has been working with the Luton Council on their journey and continues on their journey. So we'll move over to Javik to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thanks, Sean. So so what I'll go through probably in the next few minutes is why we chose LocalGov Drupal. And sort of as you can see, some of the points here outlined are focusing on a few things. For me, at the end of the day, it's about the residents or the end users, as that kind of principle of user-centered design. The platform, the community leans into it quite a lot. So it's a proven community. It's got that strong platform base. There's over 60 councils that use it as their main site. Many of those councils spin off and build microsites. So, you know, it's not one site that's powering by LGD infrastructure. There's many more. So that was a way to sort of get that buy-in early on, or just as part of the business case for it, really, to show, look, this is what XNX have done, or this is what XNS can do for us. Next is obviously being open source. Cost always comes into it. Like, I've been here for just over 7 months now, and it's one of the things that always seeps to my mind is essentially, you know, we're spending taxpayers' money, so it is a big sort of emphasis on, okay, how much is it going to cost, or, you know, how much are we spending? And for us, it's thinking about, okay, what do we want to plan for the next 3 to 5 years, and give us a solid base to really launch off that. So that open source platform gives us a very high or very good cost reduction sort of percentage. The initial build, the initial kind of scope to get onto it is something, you know, you'd see it as an average cost, but besides, you know, the extra work or any kind of extra features that if you're tied into proprietary network, proprietary systems or solutions, then what I'm finding so far is you don't really get that, because you kind of have that built by other councils, or you have other developers or other agencies that are willing to support you, because they're essentially just willing to support the community. And on the third point is, it leans into, as I mentioned, UCD, but also it's aligned to a lot of the Gov UK service standards and content patterns. So, you know, working a bit more closely to how residents, you know, essentially their experiences. So, you know, when they visit Gov UK and then essentially visit one of your local council websites, the kind of user experience and the nature of their journeys effectively are as aligned as closely as possible. So, you know, it kind of made sense to go down this route, and, you know, I'm happy that we did. Sure, next slide. And then, yeah, so we can touch on our journey so far. So just calling out three key things. So for myself, as I mentioned, you know, I've worked in public sector before, so challenging in terms of not just the project, but just learning how everything works in the public sector. So procurement, sign-off processes, sort of the stakeholder management, or the different levels of stakeholder management, has been kind of an eye-opener, has been kind of something that I need to think about, or having to sort of plan in as we kind of move on into our journey. But also, you know, one of our values, or one of our key, I think, just internally key strengths is, yeah, that collaboration. So internally we've been collaborative, but also with Annertech we've been quite collaborative and quite fast and quite open to what we can do within scope, and always try to think, okay, this is what we want to get to first, and then really start to think of what's essential for the roadmap coming down the line. And that kind of leads into the third point. It's, for me, I feel it's all encompassing, and it's quite exciting to get something out to residents. You know, for me, it's always leaning back to that UCD, and, you know, putting it out there and not being afraid to go out and ask the questions. And do you like it? Do you find it easy? Gives you feedback, because at the end of the day, it's as Sean mentioned earlier, it's built for them. So, you know, the council website is made for them, and it's made by them. You know, we want as much resident feedback as you can get. So our journey has been, yeah, I'd say along those lines, and hopefully it gets even more challenging, I assume, but also, yeah, a lot more collaboration and a lot more excitement will happen, and hopefully residents see the benefit of that.
Super. So
Yeah, gotcha.
yeah, so the crux of this, I guess, is that the timeline to be able to move to our public beta as a version was quite aggressive, which is a good thing. It's something that helps to be able to focus minds, to focus decision making. It all has to happen quite quickly. Everything has to work in unison to be able to make something like this come together. Having been involved in web projects for quite some time, it takes a challenge from one particular side of it to throw everything off. So all of the things that have to go well to make something like this happen are interesting to come back and look at a little bit later. So Javik, do you want to talk a little bit here? You're muted, Javik.
Apologies. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so I mentioned about the collaboration. So in terms of how we sort of spun up or got to that stage of delivering what you can call it public beta, but sort of that for the residents, a public preview of what's to come, what's coming down the lines. And for us, we kind of thought, okay, we've got two key milestones. One is our full launch, but also we want to get this, as I said, in the hands of the residents and get their feedback. So we decided on installing one environment, and that was straight away the production environment, having the sort of the roles and the users and the permissions already laid out. So again, that's some of the pre-homework that we did that helped Annertech, and knowing the exact permissions and getting them on board quickly, and especially for what we call SMEs or subject matter experts was also key. So it enabled everyone to kind of be on one level, get the right permissions early, and for us, it's kind of knowing that okay, that environment is set up, and now we've got something to work off. And when we started to work on it, we knew that actually the data will drive us. So leaning into the sort of the data research from our Google Analytics, from our MS Clarity, from our Hotjar, we looked at narrowing that down, and we decided we're going to launch with council tax and benefits. They were the top service areas that the residents engage with, and they were sort of the metrics that we would set. Okay, in terms of all the work that we did, and sort of then apply that to the rest of the section. So we had that tight scope, worked with the council tax team, worked with the benefits team, and whilst we had the feedback loop with them, we also had a feedback loop with Annertech, and set up quite tight sort of meetings and kind of catch-ups in place to make sure that we had a placeholder date of sort of the start of December, and work backwards from there. And that leads into sort of the next mention of having sort of parallel tracks. So whilst the technical was being set up by Annertech, which Sean can mention as well, but we also had the content sprint starting off at the same time as well, and all the elements that go around sort of content migration and content sprint. So redirects, working with SMEs, getting obviously the SMEs. So I think the key thing was thinking differently. So not thinking about what do we just need to put on there, but actually what do residents want, and have what's a top user task for that section for them. And while those things, while those sort of parallel tracks were going on, it kind of helped us really meet that first milestone, which of public preview. We had structured comms in place, so there's various comms going out internally and externally. We had a sort of a light comms plan internally and shared out, and whether it was targeted messaging to say customer services or more wider to our DDAT department or the internal council, or all staff. But also one key thing that we did, and something I learned I actually took from Kingston Council, was set up an all councillors meeting. So we had I think just a few weeks before the go live date, had an all councillors meeting in the evening, just going through essentially what's to come, with public preview, but just give them a bit of a wider context on why we're moving to open source, what's it going to give us, and then just make sure that they get visibility of it and they get their kind of feedback, and it's kind of noted. So that was one key thing, to get that done, because then that helps the sort of the buy-in phase or the support from later on, and knowing actually they are obviously aware, but obviously as we move to the full transition, it's not something that's that's out of the blue. And then so the last point, I think that the support from Annertech in terms of getting set up quite quickly. They use sort of their project management platform to keep us updated, and it's just quite, I think, Sean could probably reflect on this, it's quite fast paced in terms of, we meet up, say, on a Monday, and then it's just churning through sort of what's in development, what's in sort of progress, and then I'd say the feedbacks or the kind of back and forth is quite fast, right, Sean?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I'd mirror that everything that Javik has said there. So that the success base is based on all of these things. So without one of these things, one or some of these things happening, it can be difficult to move something like this through something like this so quickly. So particularly things that are happening in parallel. So and Annertech, one part of it, Luton are certainly a big part of it. That decision-making process, the iterative feedback, being able to get it quickly, being able to be decisive, allows all of this to happen quite well. So the last part of that is, I guess, transparency on all sides. So for this to work well, we need to be transparent with what it is that we're doing, what is possible, what's achievable. Luton need to be transparent with their needs, with communicating well, with communicating on the far side, on their side, to be able to pull things together, and all of that needs to work together to make this happen. Okay. Chivik, you happy to share?
Yes, yeah. So in this sort of next few minutes, what I'll go through is essentially some of the granular, some of the sort of the actions and approaches that we did to kind of get there quickly. And one of the key things that kind of helped, I think, deliver quickly is obviously in maybe in any project, is just with that tight scope, is what is your priority, and how do you kind of get to knowing, like, I think generally most people knew council tax and benefits, but just making sure that everyone knows the reasons, and again, going back to that data driven, knowing the data is actually there to support us. So what I'm going to share here, if you give me a second, is here. So we created this design matrix, this apologies, this decision matrix. So if you look at this, it's kind of your sort of like a priority matrix, and something that can help looking at, when it comes to especially content migration sprints, and obviously we had a line for public preview, what to work on first. So we sort of defined our criteria as the user need, looking at the data, SME readiness. So, say if bins and waste is high for us, but if the team aren't ready, or if we don't have the engagement from the stakeholders, then we said, yes, we're going to launch bins as our public preview, but this score was a 1, then that's not going to happen, because we just haven't got the time and support from the service team to give us what we need. So this helped kind of clarify where should we start. It was weighted, so we gave extra weighting to the first two, so about 30%, and the others were at 10% each. So this one had 30, this one had 30, and the rest had 10% each. And based on that kind of score, you kind of end up with a total score, and then you kind of work backwards from that. And so you can see some of the sort of the description of the criteria here. So if I just level out our 4s, we knew, okay, so between these 3, there were our top 4, and looking at them, they were all pretty much ready. And then it's just kind of looking at, okay, how complex the content on the form side is, looking at, the sort of the generating revenue or the income side, and sort of the political need internally. So we decided, okay, council tax and benefits, and bins and wastes should be coming up next, and my gut says that should be in a few weeks on a public preview, and then we'll work towards the other sections, and then essentially, as I said, just work backwards from there in terms of our content sprint. So once the team were able to handle and start these sprints off, they knew the plan for the next few months, or especially for public preview, they knew actually we're going to just focus on council tax and benefits. So one thing I did mention as part of the few of the sizes, we have currently 2 external freelance content designers on board as well to support that content migration. So they did a content audit, they looked at all our data, generated a content audit report that was shared out back internally, and that kind of supported and kind of mirrored what you see here is in terms of the complexity of things within the sections regarding content and forms that needed addressing, and that helped again support the decision. Okay, let's go with council tax and benefits, and then the other section will obviously work through. So that is something that helped kick off that. But what I think, or John can lean into this, is what helped also Annertech get on board quite quickly is doing that pre-homework. So during the time that they were just onboarding or just before they came on board, there was a lot of thought around, okay, what do we want to do? And this is where the community helps. So we essentially created this sort of example deck of what things do we like from other sites. So we kind of had this framework in place, or this approach in place, and for me it's mobile first. About nearly 70% of our traffic is mobile, so it's being driven to Annertech and internally that when we look at it, think mobile first. So working with Annertech, looking at the Figma file designs, design from mobile first, and then on the content type, so we obviously sort of shared back with them. They kind of give them a good starting point to know, okay, this is what the client is kind of after, or this is what the things that they want to look at. I don't know if you can expand more on that, Shane.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is not to be underestimated. So the understanding of what's available and what is needed is just hugely beneficial to be able to make these things happen. So having familiarity, we have the benefit with LocalGov Drupal that there's a familiarity of existing sites that are out there where we can look, we can see what they're doing, we can see what works well, what doesn't work so well, what might work well for Luton. And having done that research in the background beforehand meant we had an immediate kickstart to be able to understand what it was that we wanted to do with the Luton solution. We'll touch on it a little bit further, but Jivik has mentioned content, and there's some content designers who have been a part of this project, which have been hugely beneficial in being able to move it forward so quickly. We've been part of enough web projects to know that content can be a key factor in the success or non-success of a project happening on time. It's something that's often underestimated. So not just, someone might see it as we have lots and lots of technical things to do, we have lots and lots of design things to do, but content is content. We have content, and maybe that will work for us in the future. And it's often the failure of projects from a web perspective. So having all of that preparation done in advance, the thinking, the reviewing, the rewriting, the research on the content that was there and the content that was needed, give us a huge step up in being able to move forward quickly with this. So I will share again.
Yeah, if you share again. So just as we move on to the next slide, as you rightly said, it takes a village. It takes, and we had the right kind of trifecta. So we had the internal team here at Luton, we had the freelance content designers, and then we had Annertech onboarded roughly around the same time, around the same kind of objective really, and that combined expertise, Shane can lean into, definitely helped.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's exactly that. It's the domain knowledge of Luton, the decisiveness of Luton, the clarity in terms of what was needed. It's the technical expertise of Annertech, the LocalGov expertise to be able to know what's possible, what's not possible, but what might be tricky to achieve in a particular time frame. And then it's the pre-preparation and the continued work of content design to make sure all of those things meld together to make something happen in 11 weeks. So yeah, exactly like Jivik said, it takes a village. It really does. There's lots of things that are happening in parallel with design, with technical, with hosting, with migration, both automated and manual. And without any of those things, this becomes a lot trickier. Okay, and then the last, in terms of how do we make this happen? It's hard to talk about it without talking about community and contribution. When we're talking about community contribution in this perspective, we're kind of talking about a layered approach. So LGD as a solution is built on top of Drupal core, and Drupal in general comes with a set of features and functionality that LocalGov Drupal can leverage. So there's lots and lots of them, and there's endless examples. But just to give one, Drupal comes with a permissions system that allows us to be able to assign particular permissions and roles to particular users to allow us to be able to do what it is that they need to do. So an editor might have a different set of permissions and roles than an administrator. When it comes to LocalGov Drupal, to continue on with that same analogy, with that same example, LocalGov has a built-in set of predefined features and roles, which mean that it's immediately possible to get going to say, hey, well, we need editors, we need administrators, we need news editors, for argument's sake, without all of the pre-thinking that might need to happen to say, well, what are they? What do we need to do? What might specific people need to do? And that's just one example of it. So LocalGov Drupal builds on this with a specific set of council features that mean that those council features pre-exist. So for argument's sake, some common examples of those might be services pages or service landing pages or directories where we might list car parks. These are things that pre-exist that we can leverage as a part of projects like this without all of the rethinking or starting from scratch that's needed. And on the next level, we've contributed modules. So as we mentioned, LocalGov Drupal is built on Drupal. We have a whole community around Drupal for contributed modules that we would use to be able to solve challenges, web challenges. There's lots and lots of them. We would use them for different things, for SEO, for a technical perspective, from a migration perspective. This stuff is all out there in the open with the community, including ourselves, who are continuously feeding back in to make that whole system work. So it's hard to mention it without contributor modules, and particularly for LocalGov Drupal, the LocalGov Drupal community. So outside of all of the technical benefits that we can leverage off from Drupal and LocalGov Drupal and contributed modules, the LocalGov community is super active with both councils and developers. I mentioned working towards a shared goal, and what that looks like in reality is a very, very active Slack channel where it's split out into different things, from technical to challenges to, hey, I just need to ask a question for how other people have solved this particular problem. It may be about content, or it may be about anything at all. There's events that are run like this one. There's events that are run regularly to be able to allow for shared conversation in the same place. There's workshops. There's just open, honest conversation and transparency between councils, people who work within councils in the digital space, and developers and providers who are interested in being able to further that conversation. So community and contribution just make all of this happen. To give some more specific examples of contribution, so Annertech are heavily involved in both the Drupal and the LGD community, and so what we like to make sure is that as a part of projects like this one, we're not just using, we're contributing back where we can. And contributing comes in many different ways. It comes from conversations to move things forward. It comes from technical expertise to be able to build or expand on or work with or maintain things that exist already. And three good examples, just quick examples to solidify it a little bit here, as a part of this short project so far. For argument's sake, when we're talking about publication pages, and as we discussed it further, we realized that some of the functionality that we might like to utilize to make publications more usable across the site is a summary field, which didn't exist previously. We're contributing that back to say that this might be something that we might be able to use in the future for other councils also. As a part of our migration, so as a part of this project, we would have done a mix of automated migration for some things that were more consistent, maybe news is a good example of it, versus manual migration, which is carrying across a good example of here would be service pages, which exist already, and changing the content to the type of content that we might want in the future. Now, single or manual migration is quite a heavy experience. It can take a lot of effort in bringing things over and changing them. Carrying over media in particular was quite a challenge here from a time perspective, because we may have files that were attached to pages which need to be carried over manually. And as a part of that, we worked with Luton to create a single page migration module, which allowed them to just put in a URL that's on their existing site. They would carry over the title and the body of the page that's there, but more importantly, carry over the media that was attached to the page and create a media item from them, saving a huge amount of time in the migration of manual content. And this is something that we'll be looking to see, well, what is it that we can do with this so that other people may be able to benefit from it also. And then lastly, as a part of our content workflow from now and moving forward, we'll have, as sections of content become released on the Luton website, we'll have a practical action that needs to happen to be able to publish multiple pages at once to release a section, for argument's sake. And we've been working with the maintainer of a content moderation bulk state change module to allow to bring an existing module up to a state where others could use it reliably to be able to do the same thing as we're doing here. So just some examples of things that we'd be hoping to contribute back that might help people in the future. These are challenges that we've faced specifically here that others may face in the future that maybe they won't need so much effort to do in the future when they come across them. Alrighty, over to you, Javik.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So what's next? So mentioned the first sort of milestone was the public preview, but the next milestone is sort of our full website launch. So we're looking at the end of March for that. So it's not long to go. So it's just really working through our content sprints, working with the SMEs, and getting that kind of internally played out, but also various aspects, so comms plans, redirects, but the main thing is now to get that launched for the end of March. Beyond that, obviously, as Sean mentioned, there's this project team, so Annertech have a project team to run on, but after that, we sort of move into the hands of the managed service team. So that's a sort of service offered by Annertech, which Sean, you could briefly explain.
Yeah, kind of course. Yeah. So if as we know, web projects, the kind of building it and releasing it is kind of the first step. These are living, breathing things. So in Annertech, we have two distinct teams: a project team who will deliver projects like this one, and we also have a managed services team who continue on the relationship from both a maintenance support and for new features perspective that will continue on the relationship with Luton to be able to build in the future and improve the site as we go.
Excellent. And then it's sort of then I think where that sort of mentioned around exciting, this is where looking at our feature roadmap. So looking at our enhancements that the community have done, and there's some exciting ones coming up around election modules, some that are already used on other LGD websites. So just planning that in, and again going back to kind of those tools like the digital matrix, using things as a impact and effort matrix or Moscow kind of plan to know, okay, what features do we want and where can we plan them in, and then obviously a whole other aspect is around subsites and microsites as well. But for me, it's moving on to looking at the second next point is resident engagement. So we have sort of no core user research specifically around websites to go off. But I want to start changing that. So I want to start actually working with groups that we can get some involvement in, and have started to already. Just with our tenant housing panel, we reach out to them as part of some of the public preview testing group work, and we'll probably do so for the pre-go live as well. So that's what's next in terms of how to plan that regular feed or drumbeat of resident engagement, and then longer term mention around what's the plan for the next 2 or even 3 to 5 years is what are the sort of the OKRs or key objectives that we want to achieve. We've just started off with the main site, but talks about microsite and subsite and feature enhancements kind of play into that. And we have a project board set up for this particular project, which meets every month, and that's with senior stakeholders, and it's kind of that ongoing kind of transparency internally and knowing that we've got that kind of sort of buy-in for the next few years in terms of rolling that out.
Super. Okay. And lastly, just before we wrap up and we take some questions, it's kind of I guess what we're hearing at the minute is a bit of a rosy picture of everything, right? Which is what you can expect from this type of session. But we said we'd be doing it a disservice if we didn't talk about some things that might be on people's minds. So there's 3 questions here. The first is open source truly free? So while LocalGov Drupal is a freely usable, there's no license fees. The code is free. It's always worth considering the costs around what might be involved to make something like this happen. So if we think about it as a picture as a whole, there's a combination of hosting and maybe migration, designers, developers, maintenance and support, and the amount of cost that might be involved in this might involve how much capability or capacity you have to be able to do this yourself, right? So we've worked with all sorts of councils and otherwise where teams are very, very different every time. So in cases like this, Annertech have been involved in the design, the development, and will continue on with an ongoing relationship from a managed services perspective. We've also had cases where we were there to assist on maybe some of the heavily technical pieces only, where the capacity existed on the team to be able to drive the development themselves. And we've also worked on cases where the capacity or the capability doesn't exist currently, but the intention is to bring it to a point where it can be self-sustaining with members in the team who are coming up to speed with Drupal. So the question really is around is open source truly free? Is how much capability do you have to be able to do something yourself? Code is free. The effort that's needed to be able to take and customize and design can be as little as much as you want to. So it was mentioned in the session earlier in the week with the LocalGov Drupal team that we see instances of this where LocalGov Drupal is used almost in its installed form, where it's very, very little tweaks that are used to both the layout, the design, and the tools that are there. And in cases like that, it can be very, very quick and very, very easy to release. So how well supported is an open source project by its community? So open source kind of lives and dies on community to an extent. So in the case of LocalGov Drupal, there's a super active community between councils and developers that is always ongoing. I'd encourage anyone who is interested, even if we weren't thinking about changing now and it might be something in the future, I'd encourage you to join the Slack to see the types of conversations that are happening there that allow this to happen. Where open source projects tend to struggle, I guess, is where that community doesn't exist. And that can be a few things. It can be a project in its infancy where there's only a few people driving it. So when LocalGov Drupal started, I think it was a combination of two councils who had came together with a shared understanding of what was needed and with a goal of maybe growing into something that other councils could use, but very, very much in its infancy. It's grown to I think 60 councils is the number that was used earlier in the week, but very, very possibly more, maybe 100 sites or so are using this, and it's evident in the community that's there that this is active, that it's building, that it's only growing. So I think I mentioned earlier that 2018 is when this was the very, very beginning. To be able to grow to the number of councils that it is now is just it's an impressive feat, and it continues to grow. It's not slowing down. I think Drupal is again mentioned in the session earlier in the week, Drupal is the most used platform for councils in the UK now, above proprietary and other open source platforms.
True. And no, I'm echoing what Sean said. I joined June last year. There was an LGD camp, so that's one core event that LGD held, I believe in June or July last year. But coming from the private sector into the public and just seeing how much transparency, openness everyone was, talking or just sharing is just exciting to see, because it's the nature of the beast. We kind of so as a resident, you think you go one place for your council tax, but everyone has similar kind of challenges, right? So you essentially we're all a community. So if you contribute to it, and you'll reap the rewards, and there's that kind of willingness to support each other and really know that the work that someone else will do, but also will help someone else further up the country or further down the country.
Yeah, super. And then the last question: will I need to contribute back continuously to be part of the community? Contribution might seem scary and exciting, but it's not. So the short answer to this is no. So while it's certainly encouraged and appreciated, again, working towards shared goals, there isn't a need particularly to contribute. Some will have the capacity to be able to do so, whether it be from a development perspective or continuing conversations or input on particular things. But it's not necessarily a need. As much or as little makes sense is the right way to look at it. So the community is there regardless, I guess, is the summary of that. It's not there's not a need for it. There's no exclusion for people who are not contributing actively. The community is there regardless. And I think that brings us to,